If you love astrology and astrology forecasts and predictions, you are in for a special treat this episode because I have brought in Cole Prots to give us some of the juicy details about what to expect in May. And thank goodness it sounds like May is actually going to feel energetically lighter than the previous months. Now, Cole is a rising star in the astrology world, and having boasted over 3 million followers on TikTok and over 180,000 on Instagram, he is known for his satirical approach from ranking the signs to cosplaying as the planets. His youthful approach to astrology aims to educate and entertain those who are just starting along their spiritual journey, and I absolutely love his energy and so happy that he is here. So get your pen and paper ready, get your calendar for May ready, and get ready to learn more about what's happening in the cosmos. Welcome to Spiritual and Ambitious. I'm your host, Whitney McNeil. I'm a certified medium and spiritual teacher, and I help spiritual and ambitious souls just like you live your life purpose through your career and attract abundance by connecting into your intuition and spirit guides. Let's get spiritual and ambitious. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Spiritual and Ambitious podcast. I've got Cole Prots with me, and we are going to be revealing some juicy details about the astrology that's happening in May. Well, I should say he's going to be revealing the juicy details. I am not, and I can't wait to see what is in store. So welcome, Cole, to the podcast.
Hi, Whitney. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
I have been wanting you on this podcast for a while. I found you a long time ago on one of your reels on Instagram, and I just cracked up. I'm like, I love the way that you share information about the planets in a really relatable way. So that really spoke to me. And the way I teach intuition, I love teaching it in a way that people can understand it. But I have taken astrology and I still have trouble interpreting what it all means, as you know, because I had a reading with you and I told you that. But you bring life to what the heck is going on. So thank you for that. And I will definitely be listing your socials so other people can watch these hilarious videos that you do. I was just telling you, I found out that Aries is a cinnamon raisin bagel. So apparently that's me. And you're a Gemini, right?
Yes, I am a Gemini. I'm a Gemini sun, Aries moon, Virgo rising. I always say that the Gemini decides, are we going to be a Virgo today or are we going to be an Aries today? Recently, I've been very, very Virgo. So I'm excited to, hopefully with this spring and with some of the energy coming up, that I can let some of that Aries out a little bit more. This winter was just so long and so heavy.
I feel like this is a perfect time to talk about astrology because so many of us, especially who are sensitive to energy, are feeling this heaviness. And I've had a lot of questions that people are like, what's going on with me? Why is nothing working? You know, what is happening? And so I often get messages from spirit about what to do, or the energy is just funky right now. But I love how you'll be able to say, well, this is happening and this is conjunct whatever. So I can't wait to get all into it. But before we dive into what's happening for May, I did want to ask you, could you describe a little bit about what you feel you would call your astrology, or what type of astrology that you are in?
Yeah, so I would say if we were going for the textbook definition of it, it's tropical astrology. I like to focus on the fixed tropics. It's just what's easiest for me and what I learned. And it's, at least through my experience, what people resonate, at least with my clientele the most. But I also like to approach it through like an esoteric psychological lens, because no tea, no shade. There's always great forms of spirituality that are all different for everyone. I always say whatever resonates with you the best is what you should lean into. I like an esoteric approach to astrology because it adds a little bit of fluidity. It allows the room for more than just like the literal textbook definition, you know, and like, for example, I have a Saturn conjunct my moon, and the textbook definition of that is super closed off, never going to open up, very, very reclusive, like all of these very like heavy things. And yes, that is true, but it's also the way that I view it. Instead of like, oh, doom and gloom, you're stuck with this. It's like, okay, Well, that's your challenge, right? So that's where you get to work on. That's where you get to grow the most. That's where you get to evolve the most. So I like to look at it through, not to use this word because I hate this phrase, a self-help kind of perspective. But I like to look at it through the lens of how can you use astrology to help make you the best version of yourself, right? And encourage you to grow more. And I always like to do it with a little bit of a tongue in cheek, a little bit of satire, because astrology is so heady and it is so confusing for so many people. And there's so much that you can learn and dive into and discuss. And especially when we're on our phones, when we barely want to watch a video for 10 seconds, let alone 90 seconds or a whole minute, I really like to view how can I explain what's going on in a satirical way to make people be able to say, oh, okay, got it. Aries is, a cinnamon raisin bagel. Why would that be? Well, cinnamon has a little spice to it, right? Raisin has a little bit of that extra complexity to it. So it allows it to kind of in an easier way associate the qualities of the zodiac signs without it becoming overwhelming.
I think that's key because I feel like a lot of us are feeling very overwhelmed right now. And anything to help. I always will say, I want to see the wave. I want to see the energy current of the wave so I can ride it and know it's still coming versus burying my head and pretending it's not there. And so I love how you're like, well, this is happening. This is the thing that we could call the shit show, but let's see how we can learn and we can grow from this, which I think is really, really important. So all right. I'm going to tell everybody right now to get your pen and paper out, get your notepad out on your phone, whatever, wherever you take notes. And we're going to start diving into May and see what's going on, because I know that this episode is airing right in the beginning of May. So we're still in post-shadow, right, of Mercury Retrograde. Is that right?
Okay. Still a little bit in that post-shadow. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and this retrograde season that we just wrapped up on in April, definitely intense, very Aries focused. So a lot of saying things that, you might not have wanted to say, a little bit of biting the tongue and being like, oh, did that really Freudian slip come out of my mouth? But what I like about May in particular is that it feels kind of like that freshness that we're all looking for. It feels as though it's like that, okay, ooh, I can feel the tension in my shoulders finally stopping to drop, because the astrology of this past winter, at least in the northern hemisphere, was so heavy and there was so much going on. But the biggest things that I'm excited for in May is Pluto retrograde happening. And then also Jupiter is going to be moving out of the slow and steady Taurus and into the buzzy and exciting Gemini. The Pluto retrograde in particular, I'm excited about this one because it's the last long span of Pluto being in Capricorn. So it's currently in Aquarius, but because of the retrograde, it'll dip back. And this is going to start on May 2nd, and it'll go to September 1st. This is really kind of closing that last chapter on everything we're carrying from the last 15 years of our life. This is that last moment of saying, okay, that traditional structure, that institution, that sort of heavy, sort of corporate-y kind of like follow the rules and regulation vibe. We're getting that last little bits of, okay, what do we have to unravel? What do we have to let go of? Those old ways, those old forms of thinking, so that we can shed it to really let us step into the age of Aquarius, that rebellious, that innovative, that humanitarian, that part of us that wants to care for our neighbor, but was told that we can't. I think we're finally going to feel as though, okay, you know what? I can let go of this old perspective. I can let go of these old paradigms and these old ways of thinking. And I think we're going to start to feel that with this Pluto retrograde starting in May. It's that last little bit of let's look back so that we can really, really, really move forward with it.
I think that's great. I know that a lot of our listeners work on removing blocks and limiting beliefs and upper limits. And it sounds like this is going to be really helpful for some of those feelings that we have. Also, what comes up for me is just feeling trapped. Like I'm not going to feel so trapped anymore. Like I'm going to feel like I'm free to do things. And I've been feeling already this energy of like rebelliousness in a way. So that's what kind of comes up for me, where it's like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And also in the spirituality sector, it feels like a lot of indigo energy, where indigo spirits are like, I'm going to blaze my own trail. I'm going to do what I want to do. You can't tell me what to do. That's what it feels like to me. So that lasts through September, right? Is what you were saying?
Yeah, to the 1st of September.
Okay.
But we'll still feel the effects a little bit throughout the rest of the year, just because it's going to take a little bit longer for Pluto to move back into Aquarius. But yeah, from like May onwards of 2024, I really do think it is that removal of the block, like you said, that a lot of us look for and a lot of us seek to have. Because I think the important thing, at least that I'm encouraging in the way that I'm going to be looking at it from a reflective perspective, is saying, where am I still kind of like, and I think this is a very like subtle Capricornian trait to reflect on, is where am I still competing for achievement, right? As
Mm.
opposed to kind of just staying in my lane and celebrating the fact that we're all driving our own directions. And I think that's what we're going to be reminded of, is that society really isn't supposed to be all of us fighting against each other. It's supposed to be, how can we create better systems to uplift ourselves and acknowledge, yep, I'm really good at this, you're really good at that. Doesn't mean that either of us is better than the other. We just have to be able to find those support systems and actively look towards celebrating that, right? And celebrating the individuality. So I think it's going to remind a lot of us of that way that we've kind of been competing for recognition in a very Capricornian sense against people who we're not really supposed to be fighting a battle with. We're like coworkers, right? Peers in the spiritual space, whatever it might be. Ultimately, there's space for all of us. My mentor, the first thing that she said to me when I started working with her, she was like, the people who want to get readings from you are going to get readings from you. Do not worry about what anyone else is doing with their business. Do not worry about what they are saying or how they are communicating it. Stick to what you know and what works for you, and you will find the success. And I think it's that reminder that we don't have to monopolize everything. We all are allowed to, in a sense, kind of have our cake and eat it too. We just have to let everyone else do that.
I love it. It's celebrating individuality and recognizing other people's gifts. But I 100% agree with that advice. So years ago, I moved to Sedona, and people around me, at the time, I built my business doing readings. And so at the time I was doing readings, and people would say, "Are you sure you want to move to Sedona? There's so much competition there." I was like, no, 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 no. There's not the competition. We're all individual. I have a unique vibration. I'm going to attract the right person, and that other person's going to attract the right person. Like, no, we're not interested in that. So I love that mentality. And it sounds like that's going to be a big energy for us to embrace. But you said something else that's happening in May, and I can't remember it. I'm not retaining it. So what's that other thing you said you're really excited for?
Oh, yeah. So Jupiter is going to be moving into Gemini towards the end of May.
Okay.
So May 25th is when it happens. I'm so excited for this. So for everyone listening, if you can kind of think back to about like 12, 13 years ago, that's the last time that Jupiter was in Gemini. So if you can remember that far back, kind of the similar themes are going to be happening. I think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of social media boom. I think we're going to be seeing tons of new ways to get, receive, and share information, because Gemini is so buzzy in that way. But I think the key of what it is allowing ourselves to live in duality, because Jupiter is all about expansion and Gemini is the sign of the twins, the sign of duality. It's very easy for me as a Gemini to, recommend and talk about like, yeah, just be like two people. It's fine. It's amazing. Live in that fluidity. But I think that's why I'm really excited about May as the time in the astrology, because like I said, it feels like that freshness that we're getting, where I think people are going to start to see, oh, I am allowed to exist in duality. I am able to wear this hat, but like, maybe just turn it a little bit to be something fancier for one day instead of taking off all the hats all of the different time, that we do just as humans. It really is, it's a time where we're going to have to be a sponge and kind of willingly let everything come to us. And of course, use your best judgment to create those barriers to protect yourself, to take those boundaries to make sure that you aren't consuming anything that isn't going to be conducive for what you need. But it's kind of that moment where it's like, listen, if you're not willing to expand your mind, if you aren't willing to engage in a conversation that might challenge you a little bit, you're going to be fallen by the wayside. It is so much about, how was I describing it the other day? I was talking to a friend about it, and I was like, it's kind of like we're all going back to kindergarten and learning how to read again for the first time. We have to put ourselves in that mindset of being willing to just acknowledge that we don't know certain things, that there is information out there that we've just never been introduced to. So the more that you can let yourself acknowledge that you don't have it all, right? And you don't know it all, and you aren't, and not to say that there aren't experts in the world and experts in their field, but I was raised Catholic, the only person who was perfect was God. It's like, right, none of us are perfect, right? So it's that intellectual reminder that we aren't perfect, but that's okay. Because when you acknowledge that, then you are able to let yourself grow. And that's the key of the Jupiter and Gemini that's going to last for the next year from the end of May on.
That sounds beautiful. So growing, do you feel like this would be a good time for people to learn something new or just learn more about themselves? So I'm thinking communication is what comes up, but you were talking about growth. So any kind of, I would say if there's something that they've been wanting to do for a while or something new to just finally do the thing?
Yeah, I would say, the way that I've been kind of tapping into it early on is I'm starting to learn a new language. I'm trying to learn Greek. My partner is Greek, and he and his family are always talking Greek at the dinner table. And I'm like, it's all Greek to me, right? So that's how I'm looking at it, where I'm like, what is something that I've always wanted to do? I've always wanted to at least understand another language, because growing up in middle America, I took maybe 3 years of Spanish, and that was it in high school. So that's how I'm looking at it. So learning something new, absolutely such an important thing to do. Learning about the self, even just reflecting on where we say, when I used to work corporate, who's that person you are when you're in the office versus the person you are, at the happy hour. Looking at that sort of reflection as well, being like, who am I in this situation versus that situation? Can they be a little bit more blended together, right? Can they additionally expand? Where is my own sense of identity redundancy? Where am I kind of just going through the motions, just kind of hoping that things evolve without actually taking that action? It is a really, really buzzy time. I think starting off with a new book, new podcast, right? A new writing activity. I mean, Gemini's all about the hands, all about being tactile, all about getting pen to paper. If you've wanted to tell a story or hear a story, it's the time to do that. It is the time to consume it all. I think about the Scholastic Book Fair was my favorite thing when I was growing up, just going and getting like the Magic Treehouse books or the Goosebumps books. It's kind of like that. It's like, you're back in this sort of energetic Scholastic Book Fair, and let yourself just get something. Let yourself just grab it just because it seems interesting, not because it maybe necessarily has logic to it. Because I think that's what people forget about us Gemini individuals, is even though we are super heady and super logical, we just pick things up because we find it interesting in that moment. And if we choose to continue to dive into it more, we will. But if we're just a walking Wikipedia page for a little bit, then we're just a walking Wikipedia page for a little bit. So that's the mentality that I hope people approach it from, the consumption of media and how they allow themselves to communicate and engage with people.
I love that. I have a Gemini friend who's really close to me, and she's always doing something like that. Makes a lot of sense. You're talking about communication, and what came up was the throat chakra. I'm sensing that during this time, there's going to be a lot more healing that's happening in the throat chakra and learning how to express ourselves, because you talked about I'm this person with this group and then this person over here. How can I make that more authentic? How can I be more of me in alignment with all these other things that you've talked about too? So I've got a couple more questions for you, and we're going to ask them when we come back after this quick break. As a professional psychic medium, I've done tens of thousands of readings, but I felt a call to move more fully into teaching intuition. But I still get so many requests about doing readings. So while I don't do readings anymore, I have brought in some very trusted colleagues who are now available for live 1-hour readings on Zoom. If you would like to book your psychic medium reading, go to messengerofspirit.com/appointments to see our available readers and schedule your Zoom reading today. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging in. I'm here with Cole Prots, and we're talking about the Astrology of May 2024. And there's already been some really juicy details about what to expect. And now I want to ask you, Cole, is there anything else in store for us in May that we need to be aware of? like we need to like shield ourselves from, or maybe we're just ready to open the door and just be so celebratory and excited about it?
I think it's a little bit more of the latter. I think it's open that door, get celebratory. I didn't touch on the new and the full moons that happen every month, but the new moon in May is going to be in Taurus. And that's what I've been calling like the reestablishment of the foundation. You know, it's like really rebuilding the house from the ground up. New moon's all about new opportunities. And Taurus is the fixed earth sign. So it's saying, okay, right, what is that new foundation of myself, that new sort of stability in my life that I can really engage with? This is right off the heels of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus that happened in April, which is all about saying, hey, we have to change up our physical world. We have to let ourselves not continue to be like the bull can be on the negative side in this sort of mundane, just tilling the fields constantly. So I'm excited about the new moon because it's going to let us kind of put our feet on the ground and say, okay, cool, right? If I want to rebuild that house, the metaphorical house, if I want to rebuild that foundation of my daily life, I just have to start laying down the bricks. I just have to start pouring the concrete. And then the full moon at the end of the month in Sagittarius, the words that I wrote for it are freedom and release. It kind of gives like jumping into the new life that you've always been waiting for. Sagittarius, it's the archer, shoots the arrow at the map, goes wherever it might fall. We have to allow ourselves to acknowledge that every day is an adventure. And every moment that we get to live on this earth is a new moment, right? It's one of the things that I used to do a lot in high school. You know, I would go for a run in a park and I would sit and be like, wow, this might be the same park that I see every day, but this is a different scenario than I was in yesterday. The breeze might still be blowing, but like there's a new person running around. How can you release expectation with the full moon towards the end of May to really be in a spot that's like every day is an adventure. Every day is a learning opportunity. Sure, there's good days, there's bad days. For some people, these new moons and full moons might feel like a lot to, you know, it might feel intense, right? It might feel difficult to create that new foundation. It might feel difficult to let go and release. You know, how can you do it in a microdose kind of moment, right? You know, what's a little adventure you can go on? What is a small area of your life that you can build a new foundation? Maybe it's a career thing. Maybe it's a hobby. What I love about it, though, it's baby bird being pushed out of mama bird's nest. You know, it's saying, if this is what you want, you can make it happen. You can allow yourself to indulge in it. The big key, in my opinion, right, you know, talking about Jupiter and Gemini, talking about communication, is when Mercury moves into Taurus right at the middle of the month. So this halfway point between let's build the new foundation and let's really start learning and growing more, we have the planet of communication in the earthy, straightforward, direct sign of Taurus. The key to make May your bitch is to just be forthright about everything you want, right? Just be real about it. We mask and we hide what we communicate with others because we don't want to worry them. We don't want to stress them. Maybe we don't want them involved in our business. You can still respect those facets of life, but you don't have to keep it all held in, right? There's no reason to lie when Mercury is in Taurus. If you want something, just acknowledge it. And if someone's not going to support you, be like, cool, that's your journey, not mine. So we have to be willing to just be upfront about what we are thinking, what we are feeling, and what we are plotting and scheming. Because ultimately, if we're not, and it just all lives in this mental space, it's never going to get out into the real world. And it's never going to show up the way that you actually want it to. It's like putting your money where your mouth is, truthfully.
Absolutely. I mean, that's like manifesting, right? We can't just leave it in our head. We actually have to speak it out into the world or do that thing. And also, I really like this because it gives me permission to really be direct, which I already am. And I try to make it a little bit better, but it's like, no, I can be direct. Like that's what we're supposed to be. And I think a lot of people listening are really sensitive and don't want to hurt other people's feelings. I don't think anybody who is in a heart-centered space ever wants to. But sometimes we would tend to maybe put ourselves on the back burner for somebody else. And this is the time to really speak up and share. It's so important. I believe in general. And so I hope that everyone takes this as an invitation, the golden ticket to just do the thing, like actually say what you're thinking and put it out there to the universe. That's so good. All right. I've got some cards. I want to see what Spirit wants to share about our astrology and see what takes you get on those as well. But before we get to that, while I'm shuffling, I did want to ask you what I noticed, and I did not know this, was so I'm an Aries sun and a Virgo moon. And you said what? You're a Aries moon and a Virgo rising. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you see that we tend to connect with people who have similar placements, but not necessarily the same, but like in those main
100%.
three? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I also notice a lot. Absolutely. I think we naturally gravitate to energy that is similar to ours.
Mm-hmm.
I actually gravitate towards Scorpio individuals a lot because my moon is in Aries in the 8th house, and they both have that Mars influence. 8th house is the house that is ruled by Scorpio, but plus Scorpio has that closed off nature. Saturn next to my moon in the 8th house in Aries, it's like I'm basically a Scorpio moon. I'm pretty much a Scorpio moon at the end of the day. So I notice that a lot. Even I'll notice with like my clients, the people who come to me, I tend to get tons of Scorpio individuals, tons of Taurian individuals, because my Mercury is in Taurus. So the way that I just share and communicate, I really gravitate around that darker, spookier sort of spot. And I know how to bring people up to the light who sit maybe in that darker area. So 100%, absolutely. And I think we should allow ourselves to be receptive to that. Sometimes we have the conception in our mind of, oh, I don't know, they're a Gemini. I had a bad experience with Geminis once. It's like, well, you're attracting their energy for a reason. Mm-hmm. Why is that reason? Let yourself kind of discover that, as opposed to just writing them off before even getting them the chance.
So I just learned something. So my son is Aries in the house of Scorpio, the 8th house. And my husband, his moon is Scorpio. And then one of my really closest friends, she has a Scorpio moon too. So I'm like, oh, I see what's going on here. I get it. I love it.
Yeah. It's that 8th house influence in your chart. It brings the Scorpio out of you and it brings it towards you closer. Yeah.
All right. So here are our cards. I want to see what your take on them. We've got higher self, and it's your life purpose is calling. And then we've got the dragonfly. Your purpose is being revealed. Like, this is a very similar message, right? So I wonder how this goes with astrology, but we've got the dragonfly with a number 5. So a lot of change occurring. Your purpose is being revealed. I feel like there's some transformation that's happening. And the higher self comes with a number 9, which is a lot of completion, ending of cycles, and again, stepping more fully into your purpose. So what comes up for you around astrology with this message?
Yeah, I think the higher self piece, it really leans into that Pluto energy, in my opinion.
Yes.
And I think both of you, because Pluto is let ourselves go to the absolute bottom of the barrel to like really let it build up. And I think there is something about going low to get yourself high, not when we're talking about revenge or anything like that. Let's not go low to get high, but in terms of finding that higher self, right?
Yeah.
We always are kind of constantly, I think it's human nature to think, okay, this could be better. This could be better. But when you kind of let yourself sit in the underworld of yourself, you are able to fully accept that and then be much more conscious of how to tap into the light, the higher self. And I think the important part of that higher self message with Pluto and Aquarius is remembering that we're all interconnected. Just because we might be driving our own ships, right? We might be the main character in all of our stories. Yes, there might be 8 billion people in the world now, something like that, something crazy. We're all on this planet together. We are all experiencing the energy at the same time, right? In the moments. So our higher self is so deeply connected to everyone else's higher self. How can we allow ourselves to celebrate and uplift that without forcing people to be a different version than they're supposed to be? And I think with the dragonfly, that's Jupiter and Gemini, that's the growth, the learning, right? Being willing to kind of go out, fly around a little bit, see what flower you land on, right? See what sort of breeze you might blow into for a little bit to inform the experience. Something that I love to do is when I'm feeling in a rut and I live in New York City, I just walk through a different part of my neighborhood. I biked to one of my best friend's places last night and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen this part of the city, right? It's such a big place, right? And we all have those in our neighborhoods, whether you are in a tiny town in the middle of America, whether you are in a big city, you have to remind yourself that if you just go through the motions every day, the same path, the same routes, the same food, all that jazz, you're missing so much of potential inspiration. And I think that's what the dragonfly says as well. It's like, it's revealed when you go out. It's revealed when you fly around and let yourself flit. So I think there's a really nice synchronicity between the cards and the astrology going on.
I love it. Thank you for that interpretation and all of this amazing information about what's happening with the planets. So what I really love, I'm going to tell everybody about this. You've got some great offers. And one thing that's so helpful and easy is you have an astrology calendar for $22.22, which I love the angel number there. And it's about really helping people understand like what's happening, right, in 2024.
Yep.
But also you're available for readings, and I just got one. So I highly recommend that. I'm going to list these links in the show notes. But Cole, what's the best way to connect with you? What would you say to somebody who's like, I want to reach out? Like, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, the best way that you can find me is just, of course, through all my social medias at JK It's Cole, JKITS Cole on Instagram and on TikTok. I'm definitely a little bit more active on Instagram these days because I think that's just where I personally feel the most resonance and connection with my audience. Of course, I'm always available for readings, whether it be a mini reading, which is just like a little pre-recorded voice note, or like a full-length reading over Google Meets. I always love to connect people in that way. But I would say, even if you can't afford a reading, anything like that, I try my best to give as many astrological insights and as many little nuggets and tidbits on how to navigate the astrology on a day-to-day level through my content. So just by following, you're probably going to get a little bit of the magic that I like to share with everyone. So yeah, check me out on social media, maybe get a reading with me, whatever works for you.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom. I'll link to all that in the show notes. And all right, everyone, this was an amazing episode. I'll be back next week with a brand new one. But until then, here's to staying spiritual and ambitious. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. And if you loved it, would you please share it with a friend? I would also love your review and a reminder to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me at messengerofspirit.com, and you can take the 4 Intuitive Languages quiz and find show notes there too. If you want to connect on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, you can find me at Messenger of Spirit. I'll meet you right here next week. Here's to staying spiritual and ambitious.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM. Women's voices amplified.